Arabic, a language where many people fail in it and find it extremely difficult, like you and me, to find a teacher to be able to remain consistent and also to know the correct place to start. That is why, after learning for over 1 year with a teacher, creating a survey, traveling to a Muslim country, asking questions to natives, here are the only 3 things that you need to do that have been laid out for you step by step that will allow you to hold a conversation, inshallah. I'm not fluent, but I was able to hold a conversation with one of my teachers not even too long ago by applying these techniques. Now, number 1 is to find a curriculum. Now, you're probably thinking Al-Arabiya Bayna Yadayk, the Medina books, or even some popular sheikhs online like Sheikh Muhammad Andalus, who has Andalus Institute, or Abdurrahman Hassan, who has the Ar-Rahmaniya Institute, or even Ustad Tim Humble, who has AMAU. But when it comes to all of these different sheikhs and books, the only formula that you need to follow has been explicitly described to me by a 7-year-old, which I didn't even realize this up until I spoke to them. You see, when I went to Gambia, I spoke to one of my cousins who was as young as 7 years old, and she spoke 4 languages already. And I derived this one conclusion from her, which was, you should find a teacher that you can easily communicate with, which is the accountability part of it. And then a teacher who is also able or has taught other students in the past, which is the social proof aspect of it. And finally, a teacher which has a curriculum, a set one that they can teach you easily with. And that's literally all you need to do in the beginning. Now, the common question is, where do I find a teacher? How do I find one? I may not be able to afford one. Well, you have 3 avenues that you can take. Now, the first one is, if you have money and you're pretty well off, then you can find a sheikh that has one of these programs and actually join their Arabic program using the formula that I mentioned earlier. And ideally, this is the sheikh that you watch the most. If not, you can look for the cheapest program available that still fits the criteria. However, that is if you have less money than the first option, than the person who would be doing the first option. And third, you can create content and then you can get sponsors where people would teach you for free. However, your intention shouldn't be to rub these people off for money. You should be genuinely doing it so that you can learn the Arabic language. Now, if you really still can't find a teacher, then you can try and find someone who speaks Arabic. And I'll get into this later in the video, where you can actually speak with them and still learn the Arabic language that way. But that is for the later part of the video. Now, for number 2, it is consistency with speaking. Now, I'm not going to tell you to make a routine, write things down, start organizing your day routine. You've already heard that most likely if you've been on the internet and have watched different Arabic videos. What I'm talking about here is the actual methodology that you should take in order to learn. Let me give you an example word. ذهب. Now, ذهب means he went. So to put this in a sentence, you can say, ذهب محمد إلى al-masjid. Muhammad went to the masjid. Now you can see the verb went before the noun, which is something that you can do in the Arabic language. However, it depends on the context. Let me explain quickly. Let's say you heard the word ذهب by listening to it, which is one avenue that you can learn different words. So I'd recommend writing that down or using the document in the description, right? ذهب, you hear it by someone saying it. Okay, ذهب محمد إلى السوق. Muhammad went to the shop. By hearing this, you now know how it is used. But if you only have written it down, like the word ذهب means he went, when you hear it in a new context, you'll be very confused. Like, for example, someone who's talking about fear going away, saying ذهب الخوف, the fear has went away. You may be confused. Wait, I thought ذهب meant he went. How come you're using he went for something that isn't, considered a he? Well, that's where it comes in, learning words with context by listening. The next time you listen to a word, and I'd recommend writing this down, make sure that you write the sentence that you have learnt with that word. If you memorize that word that way, that means in the future, when you start hearing people speak, you won't be completely confused when you hear someone, using a word in a context that you haven't understood. Now, I've also put some good podcasts in the description for listening, because I can understand that you're probably not living in a Muslim country like myself, and people aren't going to be speaking Arabic on the streets. So the best thing to do is to listen to those podcasts, even if you don't understand anything. And that's really hard to grasp, because you're expecting to at least pick up a few words, but then you watch the entire podcast, your brain's turning. Even if you pick up 1 word from that podcast, or even 2, that is still extremely beneficial, because the majority of the words that people speak are the ones that are being spoken, if that makes sense. People aren't going to be talking about, I don't know, words that aren't very common in their common vocabulary. People will be using words like the, people, them, he went, she went, maybe I went. And then so you can start to learn different variations of the word dhahaba. Now, by memorizing this word, by using an Anki flashcard deck, in which I have that in the description that you guys can use and also add your own words to for free, you can start adding those words into there so that you can review them. So that's the next part of it. You have listening and then actually memorizing the words. And then please only take a few words every single day. There are several words in that Anki deck, but you shouldn't focus on trying to master all of them in a day. Take maybe 3, 4, 5 words that you will consistently revise throughout the day, and then build up from there if you can do more. Now, the third point is learning how to speak fluently. Now, the biggest mistake I made was using vocab like it's maths. You have to memorize the words, and then once you've memorized 100 words, then it's the time to actually use those words. No, when you memorize a word, you should try and apply that word straight away, because by spending too much hours using Anki and not actually speaking, you're never actually going to improve your speaking. You only improve speaking by speaking more. It's like, for example, someone who wants to become a pro athlete in running, for example. Yes, they may get some benefits from doing training their calves, training their Achilles by, running on a treadmill, but they'll actually only ever get better by running itself, like running on the track that they are going to race on. That's the best way that they can get better. It's the same with learning Arabic. You can't expect to become better at speaking by spending all your time memorizing vocab. You become better at speaking by actually speaking more. So for people who cannot find a teacher, you need to at least try and find someone who can speak it, maybe at work or university, or even the friends that you have in your circle. Now you may be thinking, okay, maybe it's a bit too hard for me because I find it extremely hard to make friends or to have contact. Well, what I would say to that is try and put yourself out there. If you really are struggling, then I do have some sort of community that I am making in the description that you can be a part of. But what I would really recommend, and what I would recommend myself as sincere advice, is try your best to find someone, even if you have to become uncomfortable. Because a lot of the scholars, they say knowledge is something that you have to put full effort into only to receive a little bit of it. And that's something that is extremely valuable for Muslims, because you can't expect to become something great in any sport or any field if you aren't going to put in full effort into achieving that thing. So that's why I would recommend try to find someone who can speak the language. So if you really don't have any other option, then you can check my community in the description, where we will have native speakers, people who have spoken the Arabic language for years, and even myself if you want to practice with me. So that'll be in the description, inshallah. Now, once you have found someone who can speak the Arabic language, what you can do is you can now set up a time or a schedule with that person where they call you, because accountability is extremely important. And what this does is it makes it much more easier for you to learn the Arabic language, because now you have a routine. And by having that routine where they call you at set times, it reduces the distractions that may occur. For example, when I was in Gambia and I was, speaking to people, I realized that a lot of them are quite disciplined, like a lot of my cousins, because one of them, they told me that they memorized around 12 juz, the other one a hafiz. And one of the routines that they explained to me was that when they went to boarding school, they had an entire routine from waking up to sleeping. And this routine included a portion of their day where they would memorize the Quran. And they were talking about memorizing 5 pages in 3 hours, which is crazy to me. But what kind of made sense was that they had no distractions. There was no phone calls, there was no arguments, there were no, random, messages that would increase a person's cortisol levels. There was just focus. And that's something that you need. So if you can, try and cut out these small distractions that you have in your life. An example that, I have done, an example that has benefited me, is cutting out social media usage. Using certain app blockers that I feel are quite beneficial, because yes, the root problem is the social media usage, but why not use a means to actually stop that so that you can become more productive? And it has worked for me, definitely. So why not try that out? Reduce your screen time or reduce blockers that you feel are preventing you from learning the language. Remember, everything that I have said in this video will be in the description: the podcast, the Anki deck, the community, also the Google document that explains absolutely everything we've covered in this video. And it's all free. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.